Gotham City, dark, broken, and drenched in the unrelenting shadows of crime and corruption. It is a city where the light rarely shines, and its very soul seems tainted by the endless cycle of despair. It is the perfect breeding ground for crime, where the most sinister minds come to manifest their madness. And at the center of it all stands Batman, Gotham's eternal protector, a man driven by a singular mission to rid the city of its criminal cancer. He wears the mask of the Bat, an emblem of fear meant to intimidate the very criminals he fights. But what if, in his endless battle against Gotham's underworld, Batman is inadvertently creating his own worst enemies? In every iteration of Batman's story, there is a recurring theme: Batman's foes are not mere criminals. They are psychological extremes. The Joker, Two-Face, the Riddler, Scarecrow. These aren't just bad men, they are symbols of something much deeper. Each villain Batman faces represents a deeper reflection of his own psyche, the fear, chaos, obsession, and moral conflict that rages within Batman himself. What if, in his mission to protect Gotham, Batman has unwittingly become the very reason for these criminals' existence? Is it possible that Batman, in his role as the city's protector, has created the very monsters he fights against? At the heart of Gotham's criminal underworld lies the question: what happens when a city's darkness is confronted by a figure of absolute light? Batman is the embodiment of order, control, and discipline, and in that pursuit of perfect justice, he has come to represent the very thing that Gotham's criminal minds oppose. Yet, the more Batman fights to impose control, the more chaos seems to breed around him. It's as though every action he takes to stop the spread of criminality results in a new breed of villainy. The Joker, for example, is Batman's polar opposite, a force of pure chaos who thrives on unpredictability and madness. The Joker is not just a criminal, he is an agent of entropy, seeking to destroy the very fabric of society that Batman fights to protect. But what if the Joker's existence is, in part, Batman's doing? The Joker himself has claimed in multiple iterations that he and Batman are two sides of the same coin. Batman's refusal to kill, his unyielding moral code, creates a contrast to the Joker's chaotic worldview, but it also enables the Joker's very existence. Batman's moral restrictions act as a catalyst, giving rise to the Joker's madness, as the Joker's actions exist only to challenge Batman's beliefs. The relationship between Batman and the Joker isn't simply that of hero and villain, it is one of mutual creation. Every time Batman tries to impose order, the Joker's chaotic nature grows stronger. Batman's very presence, his uncompromising code of conduct, forces the Joker into being a reflection of Batman's own fears and limitations. In trying to create a world where crime can be controlled, Batman inadvertently releases a being of pure chaos that thrives on Batman's own sense of control. The Joker may have been created by Gotham's darkness, but he was shaped and honed by Batman's inability to transcend his own rigid moral structure. Batman creates the perfect foil to his own existence in the form of the Joker. The two are linked in an endless, cyclical battle, each continuing the other's existence. And it's not just the Joker who can be seen as a creation of Batman's crusade. Two-Face, another of Gotham's most tragic villains, is a man whose descent into madness was caused by a single event in his life: his disfigurement at the hands of a criminal he was trying to stop. Harvey Dent, a once pure district attorney, was transformed into Two-Face after Batman's presence in Gotham began to alter the very nature of justice. Harvey's belief in absolute justice was fractured by the cruel randomness of fate, a randomness that Batman, in his unyielding need for control and order, cannot fully understand. Two-Face is not merely a villain. He is a personification of Batman's struggle with the duality of justice, the need to balance order and chaos, to punish the wicked without losing his own soul. Two-Face represents Batman's fear of what might happen if he steps too far into the shadows of his own code. In trying to impose a rigid moral order, Batman inadvertently creates the space for Two-Face's madness to take root. The Riddler, too, is another product of Batman's quest for order. The Riddler's obsessive need to create puzzles and challenges is directly tied to Batman's intellectual approach to crime fighting. The Riddler's puzzles are the extreme reaction to Batman's unrelenting search for the truth. Every riddle the Riddler creates is a challenge to Batman's intellect, a challenge that forces Batman to confront his own limitations. In trying to solve every puzzle and catch every criminal, Batman becomes the very reason for the Riddler's existence. The Riddler does not just seek to outsmart Batman, he seeks to prove a point. By creating complex puzzles, he forces Batman to question his own need for control, his unwavering commitment to following the rules. And then there is Scarecrow, whose manipulation of fear is perhaps the most direct reflection of Batman's own inner turmoil. Batman has spent his entire life driven by fear, the fear of losing those he loves, the fear of failing in his mission. Scarecrow takes Batman's fear and weaponizes it, using the same psychology that Batman himself uses to fight crime. Scarecrow's toxins make people confront their deepest fears, and in doing so, they become trapped by them, much like Batman is trapped by his own obsession with fear and justice. Scarecrow is a product of Batman's own psyche, a manifestation of his deep-seated insecurities, and in creating a persona that seeks to battle the darkness, Batman inadvertently creates a villain who embodies that very darkness. So, is Batman creating his own villains? The evidence points toward a disturbing reality. Batman's very existence, his rigid moral code, his uncompromising nature, and his relentless pursuit of justice has led to the creation of the very criminals he seeks to destroy. Every action he takes to rid Gotham of evil seems to inadvertently spawn new, more dangerous adversaries, ones who exist not just to commit crimes, but to challenge the very principles that Batman stands for. Batman's obsession with control, his need to impose order on a world filled with chaos, creates a feedback loop of violence and madness, a cycle that will never end because he cannot escape the very nature of what he has become. The real question, then, is not whether Batman is responsible for the creation of his villains, but whether he can ever break free from the cycle he's created. Can Gotham ever be saved without Batman confronting the darkness within himself? Can Batman continue to fight without becoming the very thing he swore to destroy? As long as Batman fights for Gotham, he will continue to create new villains, new reflections of his own fears, doubts, and flaws. And in that way, Batman will forever be trapped in an unending battle, a battle of his own creation, a war that he can never truly win. Batman's crusade to cleanse Gotham has been a saga marked by intense moral dilemmas, psychological warfare, and an ongoing battle with his own inner darkness. For years, the Dark Knight has fought against the unrelenting tide of crime that threatens to drown his city, yet each victory he claims seems to breed even more potent adversaries. Is Batman, the man who fights against evil, unintentionally creating the very monsters he seeks to destroy? This question haunts Gotham's streets like an ever-present shadow. The answer, when examined deeply, suggests a disturbing truth. Batman may not simply be fighting against Gotham's criminals. He may in fact be responsible for giving rise to his most dangerous enemies. Gotham City, a place drenched in misery, crime and suffering, could be seen as a reflection of Batman's own unresolved trauma. The city itself is shaped by its brokenness, just as Batman's own psyche is molded by the pain and loss he's experienced. But Gotham is more than just a backdrop to his story. It is a living, breathing entity, and in a way it becomes Batman's mirror. As much as he fights to protect Gotham from its darkest elements, he is also inextricably tied to the city's eternal struggle against itself. Gotham breeds the very monsters Batman fights, but it does so not only because of the city's corrupt nature, but because of the role Batman plays in perpetuating that chaos. Take the Joker, for instance, a villain who is often considered Batman's greatest adversary, and perhaps the most perfect foil to his character. The Joker is not merely a man, he is the embodiment of chaos, madness, and the very thing Batman cannot accept, the idea that there is no absolute moral order. The Joker's existence is not just a consequence of Gotham's decay, it is an extreme reaction to Batman's presence. Batman created the Joker, not through any direct action, but by embodying everything the Joker detests. Batman's strict moral code, his unwavering commitment to justice, his refusal to kill, stands in stark contrast to the Joker's anarchistic worldview. The Joker is driven by the need to prove that the world is not governed by any grand moral order, and in this pursuit, he seeks to destroy everything Batman stands for. Yet, Batman's own refusal to kill, his perfection of justice, fuels the Joker's madness. Every time Batman refuses to take a life, even that of the most evil and destructive criminals, he creates the space for the Joker to exist. The Joker needs Batman as much as Batman needs him, because in many ways the Joker's purpose is to prove Batman wrong. Batman, by refusing to break his code, creates the very conditions for the Joker's existence. He is locked in a psychological battle with the Joker, one where his own morality is pushed to its limits, a battle that has no end. In trying to protect Gotham, Batman inadvertently makes it impossible to fully rid the city of chaos, because chaos itself is a counterbalance to the order Batman seeks to impose. But the Joker is far from the only villain that is a byproduct of Batman's existence. Two-Face, Gotham's tragic district attorney turned criminal, is another figure born from Batman's mission. Harvey Dent's descent into madness begins after an encounter with Gotham's criminal underworld, an event that leaves him scarred and broken physically and mentally. Batman's relentless fight against crime in Gotham, his efforts to impose order and justice on a city rife with corruption, helped create the very conditions that pushed Harvey Dent into the abyss. Harvey, once a man of moral clarity, is torn apart by the unpredictability of fate, the one thing that Batman's structured world cannot handle. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face is an embodiment of the consequences of Batman's desire to control everything. In trying to impose a sense of order, Batman unwittingly creates the space for Harvey to turn into a man who believes that life should be governed by pure randomness, and this belief fuels the two-headed coin that defines Two-Face's destiny. Two-Face's existence is a direct result of Batman's influence on Gotham. Harvey Dent was a symbol of justice until Batman's war on crime pushed him into the abyss of chaos. The question becomes, is Two-Face a natural consequence of Gotham's corruption, or is he the product of Batman's refusal to allow the world to function without absolute moral clarity? Could Batman have saved Harvey, Or did his uncompromising mission to fight crime create an environment where Harvey Dent's psychological fragility was exploited by the very system he was trying to protect? Batman may not have been responsible for Harvey's descent into madness, but his obsession with maintaining order, his rigid view of justice, created the space for Two-Face to emerge as the ultimate counterpoint to Batman's unyielding moral code. Then there's the Riddler, whose obsession with puzzles and riddles takes on a darker, more disturbing edge in the face of Batman's meticulous methods. The Riddler represents a mind twisted by the need for intellectual superiority, and in his games, Batman is both the challenge and the enemy. The Riddler, obsessed with riddles and challenges, sets puzzles specifically to test Batman's intellect. But what if the Riddler's existence is a direct response to Batman's obsession with solving every crime? Batman's own need to order and control Gotham through the application of logic and strategy creates the very environment that enables Riddler's chaotic genius to thrive. Batman's thirst for knowledge, his desire to understand and solve the complex problems Gotham presents, inadvertently creates a criminal mind that views life as a game, with each crime a puzzle to be solved. The Riddler is a reflection of Batman's obsession, and in trying to outsmart him, Batman essentially fuels the Riddler's desire to prove he is Batman's intellectual equal. Scarecrow, too, is a product of Batman's psychological conflict. Dr. Jonathan Crane, a former psychiatrist turned villain, uses fear as his primary weapon. What makes Scarecrow so dangerous is that he doesn't just weaponize fear. He taps into Batman's deepest vulnerabilities. Batman's fear of losing Gotham, his fear of his own failures, and his internal battle with his very sense of justice are all exploited by Scarecrow, whose fear toxin forces Batman to confront the darkest parts of himself. But what if Scarecrow is just another product of Batman's own internal battle? Batman's struggle against his own fear, against his unrelenting desire to impose order on Gotham's chaotic underbelly, creates the perfect psychological battleground for Scarecrow's manipulation of fear to take root. Batman has spent his entire life fighting against his deepest fears, and in doing so, he has created a villain whose primary weapon is the very thing that drives Batman's actions: fear. Scarecrow is Batman's mirror image, an embodiment of what Batman might become if he were unable to face his own deepest insecurities. Through each of these villains, it becomes clear that Batman's war on crime is not just a physical battle, it is a psychological one. Batman's own mental state, his rigid moral code, his unyielding need for control are the forces that feed the very monsters he is trying to defeat. Gotham's criminals are not just individuals with their own motives, they are distorted reflections of Batman's own psyche. By trying to impose a strict moral order on a city that thrives on chaos, Batman creates the conditions for these villains to emerge. His actions, his unflinching drive to rid Gotham of crime, have inadvertently given rise to the very chaos he seeks to eliminate. What Batman fails to understand, or perhaps refuses to confront, is that his mission to rid the city of crime and corruption has, in a way, created the very environment for it to flourish. Each time Batman defeats a villain, another emerges, stronger and more dangerous. His attempts to establish a world of justice and order only breed new threats, pushing Gotham further into an endless cycle of violence. The question is no longer whether Batman is creating his own villains, but whether he can ever break free from the cycle he's created. Every action he takes to stop crime seems to fuel the very chaos that Gotham thrives on. Batman, in his obsession with justice, has made Gotham's war against evil a self-perpetuating cycle, one that he cannot ever truly win. And so, Gotham's criminals continue to rise, and Batman continues to fight, locked in an endless battle against the very darkness he has helped create. The more he struggles, the more he becomes entangled in the cycle, a cycle that will never end as long as Gotham needs its protector. Batman has become both the hero and the creator of his greatest foes, and in doing so, he may have unknowingly trapped himself in a battle that will last for eternity. His immortality, his unbreakable will, is what keeps Gotham alive, but it also keeps the darkness alive, and so Batman's fight will never truly end. As Batman stands alone in the quiet of Gotham's night, his silhouette a constant against the changing skyline, there's a question that lingers in the shadows, a question that has gnawed at him since the first time he donned the cape and cowl. Is he truly the hero Gotham needs, or is he simply a man pushing back against a tide he's unwittingly helping to create? This question is not only philosophical, it's deeply psychological. Batman's war against crime is rooted in his past, his pain, and his trauma. The city is defined by its corruption, its chaos, and the endless cycle of darkness. But in Batman's attempt to impose order, to clean Gotham's streets of crime, has he made the very forces he fights stronger. Gotham is a city that feeds on conflict. The rich, the poor, the corrupt, the just. They all coexist in a strange balance, a tension that has shaped the city's identity for years. Batman, in his quest to rid the city of crime, has become the embodiment of order, of control, and justice. However, in this pursuit, he often overlooks the one key aspect of Gotham's psyche, its need for chaos. As much as Gotham's criminals are its downfall, they are also a reflection of the city's own heart. They are the rebellious side, the chaotic undercurrent that keeps Gotham from becoming completely stifled. Batman, by trying to eradicate the chaos, has unwittingly cultivated it, creating new and more dangerous forms of villainy with every crime he stops. To truly understand this dynamic, it's necessary to look at how Batman's arrival in Gotham and his ascension to being the city's greatest protector may have shifted the balance of power. Gotham was, and perhaps always has been, a city of extremes. Its criminals, from petty thieves to larger-than-life figures like the Joker or Ra's al Ghul, represent the polar opposites of the human condition. Batman, however, represents the ideal of control, of order. His very presence, as a crime fighter, ensures that there is a counterforce to everything he stands for. Every time Batman stands tall and imposes his moral code, Gotham responds by giving birth to a villain more twisted, more unpredictable, and more dangerous than the last. Consider Ra's al Ghul, the leader of the League of Assassins. Ra's represents a worldview in direct opposition to Batman's, where Batman believes in justice achieved through discipline. Ra's believes in the destruction of cities to bring about rebirth. Ra's operates on the belief that Gotham's corruption can only be cleansed through total destruction. Batman, in trying to prevent Ra's from fulfilling his goals, is forced into a position of moral rigidity. His desire to stop Ra's al Ghul's plans pushes Batman to the edge of his own code. In a sense, Batman is defined by Ra's, and his refusal to kill or destroy becomes a tool that Ra's can use to push him into increasingly difficult and impossible moral situations. Batman's strict moral code, the very essence of his identity, becomes a trap, forcing him to face an opponent who is the antithesis of everything he believes in. Ra's al Ghul is, in a way, the product of Batman's own inability to cross the line. The Joker, however, stands as the most disturbing product of Batman's obsession with controlling Gotham. The Joker is an agent of chaos, the embodiment of everything Batman fears. In his attempt to impose a clear moral framework on Gotham, Batman has given rise to the very thing he cannot control, the Joker's unpredictable madness. Joker's existence is a direct counterbalance to Batman's worldview, a living testament to Batman's inability to maintain control. Joker doesn't want power, wealth, or control. He simply wants to watch the world burn and test Batman's limits. And every time Batman defeats the Joker, the cycle begins again. The Joker returns with new plans, new chaos, new tests for Batman's moral code. Is it possible that Batman's refusal to kill, his dedication to never breaking his moral code, has become the very thing that sustains the Joker's existence? The deeper Batman goes into this war, the more intimately tied he becomes to Gotham's villains. It's a relationship of cause and effect. Batman stands as the perfect hero, one who cannot kill, who believes in justice above all else. But his very nature creates the conditions for the villains to thrive. Gotham thrives on chaos, and as long as Batman holds the line against it, new adversaries will always arise to push him to the breaking point. The more Batman fights for Gotham's soul, the more he faces villains who reflect the very conflict that defines him. Take Scarecrow, for example. Dr. Jonathan Crane's weapon is fear, a fear that Batman knows all too well. Fear is the thing that drives Batman's entire mission. He fears Gotham's descent into complete chaos. He fears the loss of his moral compass. He fears the consequences of inaction. Scarecrow, by creating fear toxins, forces Batman to confront his deepest vulnerabilities. And yet, the more Batman tries to overcome this fear, the more Scarecrow's power grows. Batman's own inner turmoil, his inability to fully let go of his fears, and his obsession with control, feeds directly into Scarecrow's powers. It's a vicious circle. Batman's fight against fear is the very thing that makes Scarecrow powerful. Then there is the Riddler, who tests Batman's intellect and challenges his need for control. The Riddler doesn't just commit crimes for wealth or power. He creates elaborate puzzles and games for Batman, forcing him into situations that demand pure intellect. The Riddler exists because Batman's very existence demands puzzles, and in trying to outsmart Gotham's criminal mind, Batman has created a mastermind who thrives on playing his own game. The Riddler's puzzles challenge Batman's rigid intellect, and each time Batman solves one, he's simply proving that he's part of the game. He's part of the system that fuels the madness. This isn't just about Gotham's criminals. It's about the psychological battle Batman faces as he goes deeper into the abyss. Every villain Batman faces is a distorted reflection of himself, a figure that highlights the very flaws in his thinking. His constant battle against Gotham's crime syndicates is in essence a battle against his own psyche, against the darkness inside himself. Batman cannot escape the fact that his mission is built on the very same contradictions that define his enemies. Every criminal he defeats is simply another reflection of his own fear, obsession, and need for control. By trying to impose order on a chaotic world, Batman creates the chaos he fears most. What if Batman's war on crime is not only futile, but the very thing that guarantees the continuance of Gotham's endless suffering? Gotham's criminals, from the Joker to Two-Face to the Riddler, are not just embodiments of criminality, but representations of Batman's own internal conflict. His need to control Gotham's chaotic streets only fosters the chaos, creating a city where villains are born in response to Batman's presence. The more Batman fights, the more the cycle continues, a cycle that feeds into itself. Batman's very refusal to kill, his imposition of order, ensures that Gotham will never be free from the cycle of violence and chaos he created. Gotham, it seems, is destined to remain a city of darkness, as long as Batman stands in the shadows, protecting the city from the very villains he has made. As the years go by, the question remains, can Batman ever escape this endless loop? Can he ever truly defeat Gotham's criminals, or will he always be part of the cycle, forever creating the very chaos he seeks to end? The fight may never be won, but it will always continue, and Gotham's endless cycle of crime and redemption will be the legacy Batman leaves behind. The more he struggles, the more the city's darkness grows, and perhaps that's the tragedy of Batman's existence. The immortal protector who can never fully escape the chaos of the city he was born to save. As Batman's war on crime continues, Gotham's streets remain as unforgiving as ever. But the city is not just a battleground between light and darkness. It has become a psychological prison for Batman, a place where his very identity is intertwined with the forces he seeks to destroy. Gotham is a living organism, constantly evolving, constantly feeding on its own contradictions, and Batman, for all his heroism, is just as bound to the city's fate as the criminals he faces. The more he strives to rid Gotham of evil, the more entrenched he becomes in the very darkness he fights against. Every action he takes, every victory he claims, only serves to create new monsters, new villains who exist to challenge him, and in many ways, to challenge his own moral code. In examining this, it becomes clear that Batman is not merely responding to crime in Gotham. He is shaping it. The city's greatest adversaries, the Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, the Riddler, and others, are not mere criminals, but representations of Batman's psychological and moral battles. With every villain that rises, Batman's role in their creation becomes more evident. Batman, in his unyielding mission to protect Gotham, has shaped Gotham's darkness as much as he has shaped its light. His mission is not only about stopping criminals, but about maintaining his own sense of control and order in a city that thrives on chaos. But what happens when that control is challenged, when the very essence of his existence is questioned? Take the Joker, for example. The Joker is often portrayed as Batman's ultimate foe, a character whose very nature is a manifestation of chaos and madness. Joker has no rules, no boundaries, no sense of morality. He thrives on destruction, on proving that the world is inherently meaningless. But in many ways, Batman's own existence has created the Joker. The Joker is not just a reflection of Gotham's madness, but of Batman's uncompromising sense of justice. The Joker exists to challenge Batman's ideals, to prove that Batman's belief in order and structure is flawed. The more Batman stands firm in his commitment to justice, the more the Joker seeks to break that commitment, to show that absolute moral clarity cannot exist in a world as broken as Gotham. In a sense, Batman's refusal to kill has created the Joker's need to destroy. Every time Batman refuses to take a life, he creates the space for the Joker to thrive, for the Joker to push the boundaries of Batman's self-imposed moral code. The Joker's existence is a direct consequence of Batman's unyielding stance on justice. The Joker is the antithesis of everything Batman stands for. But Batman's refusal to compromise his own morals enables the Joker's twisted worldview to grow stronger. In trying to impose order on Gotham, Batman inadvertently created the very force that seeks to tear down that order. The Joker, then, becomes more than just a villain. He is a reflection of Batman's own flaws, his own fear of failing, his own struggle with control and chaos. And in many ways, Batman is complicit in the Joker's creation. Every time Batman stands against the Joker, he is not just fighting a criminal, but his own internal darkness, his own inability to reconcile the contradictions within himself. Batman's uncompromising nature, his refusal to kill, his need for order, creates the conditions for the Joker to rise as the ultimate force of chaos. The Joker is Batman's mirror, reflecting back at him all the things he cannot accept, the unpredictability of life, the violence he has witnessed, and the darkness that lives within him. Similarly, Two-Face, Gotham's former district attorney Harvey Dent, is a tragic product of Batman's war on crime. Harvey's duality, his split between good and evil, is not merely a personality flaw. It is a direct result of the way Batman's actions in Gotham have shaped him. Harvey Dent's descent into madness is triggered by the brutal chaos that Gotham's criminal world breeds, but it is Batman's presence in the city that gives Harvey's duality form. Harvey Dent was once Gotham's shining symbol of justice, but his exposure to the city's deep corruption and violence, amplified by Batman's vigilantism, fractures Harvey's sense of self. In trying to fight crime, Batman has forced Harvey into a moral crisis, pushing him toward the belief that justice is no longer black and white. It is instead determined by chance, by the flip of a coin. Two-Face is a product of Gotham's warped justice system, a system that Batman has been partially responsible for creating. In trying to fight Gotham's corruption, Batman has inadvertently created a villain whose actions reflect the fractured moral code that Batman himself sometimes questions. Scarecrow, Dr. Jonathan Crane, represents another facet of Batman's own psyche, his fear. Batman is defined by his ability to confront his fears head-on, but his refusal to fully acknowledge and let go of those fears results in the creation of someone like Scarecrow, who seeks to weaponize the very thing Batman fears the most, his own vulnerability. Scarecrow uses fear toxins to manipulate and control Gotham's citizens, making them confront their darkest nightmares. But in a disturbing way, Scarecrow is also making Batman confront his own vulnerabilities, his own deepest fears. In trying to conquer his fears by wearing the mask of the Bat, Batman has given rise to a villain who uses fear as a weapon that cuts straight to the heart of Batman's own struggle. Scarecrow is not just a product of Gotham's crime. He is a product of Batman's psychological battle to maintain control over his own fears. Batman, in trying to use fear to control Gotham, has unintentionally created a villain whose very existence is rooted in Batman's unresolved fears. And then there is the Riddler, whose puzzles and challenges are direct reflections of Batman's own intellectual battle. The Riddler thrives on puzzles, on creating challenges that force Batman to confront his own limits, his own need for control. Batman, in his quest for order, in his obsession with solving every crime and puzzle, has given rise to a mind that challenges him at every turn. The Riddler's existence is a direct consequence of Batman's methodical approach to justice. By trying to impose order on a chaotic world, Batman has created a figure whose intellectual puzzles force Batman to question his own understanding of justice and control. Batman is trapped in a game that he cannot easily solve, a game that the Riddler, in his madness, controls. The Riddler's puzzles are Batman's own creation, the result of Batman's insatiable need to control every outcome. In all these cases, Batman's villains are not simply reflections of the criminality of Gotham, but of Batman's own mind. Batman's war on crime is not just an external battle, it is a psychological one. The more he fights to rid Gotham of crime, the more he creates new forms of chaos that are inherently linked to his own psychological struggles. Gotham's criminals are born from Batman's own inner conflict, his need for order, his refusal to accept the chaos within himself, and his uncompromising moral code. The question, then, becomes, can Batman truly win the war on crime if the war is within him? Can he ever truly rid Gotham of its villains if they are, in part, created by his very presence? Batman's greatest adversaries are not just criminals. They are representations of his deepest fears, his psychological limitations, and his inability to fully transcend his own dark past. Gotham's villains are the embodiment of the contradictions within Batman himself, contradictions that he cannot fully escape. In trying to fight crime, Batman has inadvertently created the very forces he seeks to destroy. Each time he battles a villain, he is not just fighting a criminal, but a distorted reflection of himself. In trying to impose his own moral code on Gotham, Batman has, in a sense, created the very chaos he seeks to eliminate. Gotham's darkness will never be fully vanquished because it is part of Batman's own soul, and as long as Batman continues his fight, so too will the cycle of chaos and villainy. As Batman stands in the shadow of Gotham's towering skyline, his cape billowing in the wind, he faces a haunting realization. The war he has waged for years, the fight against crime, the struggle to impose justice, has begun to feel like an endless cycle, a cycle that feeds into itself. Each time Batman stands victorious, a new enemy rises, more dangerous and more unpredictable than the last. Gotham's criminals are not mere obstacles, they are manifestations of his own internal battles. With each villain Batman confronts, he sees not just a reflection of Gotham's darkness, but a reflection of his own soul. The villains of Gotham, the Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, the Riddler, and many others, are more than just criminals. They are not mere representations of chaos or lawlessness. They are the products of Batman's own refusal to confront his deepest fears and his unwillingness to let go of the very qualities that make him who he is. Every villain Batman faces is not only a challenge to his strength, but a challenge to his very identity. Each one is born from his psychological fragility, a fragility that he has spent his life trying to suppress. The Joker, perhaps the most infamous of Batman's adversaries, is a direct reflection of Batman's deepest fear, the fear that order cannot exist in Gotham. The Joker seeks to prove that everything is meaningless, that there is no inherent morality, no clear line between good and evil. The Joker's existence is the antithesis of everything Batman stands for, yet the Joker cannot exist without Batman. In trying to maintain order, Batman has created the very force that seeks to destroy that order. The Joker's chaos, in many ways, is a necessary counterpart to Batman's own unyielding desire for justice and control. As much as Batman tries to eliminate the Joker, he finds that the Joker's madness is eternal, just as his own mission will always persist. The Joker's obsession with Batman, his belief that Batman is the only one capable of truly understanding his madness, reveals a deep truth: Batman and the Joker cannot exist without each other. In trying to defeat the Joker, Batman is not just battling a criminal, he is battling his own inability to accept that Gotham cannot be fully saved. Batman's unwavering commitment to saving Gotham has led him to believe that there is always a way to restore order, but the Joker shows him the harsh truth: order cannot exist without chaos, just as light cannot exist without darkness. Every time Batman tries to enforce order, the Joker's chaos grows stronger. In trying to protect Gotham, Batman creates the very circumstances that enable the Joker's madness to flourish. The Joker is the product of Batman's obsession with control, a symbol of the balance between order and chaos, a balance that Batman cannot seem to escape. Similarly, Two-Face is another tragic figure whose existence is tied to Batman's war on crime. Harvey Dent was once Gotham's shining beacon of justice, a man whose moral compass was as steadfast as Batman's own. But as Gotham's criminal underworld continued to escalate, as Batman's own influence over the city began to take hold, Harvey Dent became torn between the ideals of justice he once held dear and the brutal reality of the chaos around him. Two-Face's transformation was not just a consequence of Gotham's crime, it was a direct result of Batman's presence in the city. Harvey's descent into madness, his belief that justice can be randomly dispensed through the flip of a coin, represents a direct response to the way Batman views Gotham. Batman believes in a rigid moral order, and in trying to impose that order on Gotham, he has forced Harvey Dent into the belief that justice can only exist through chance. Batman, by refusing to allow Gotham's criminal world to exist in its natural state, created the very environment that twisted Harvey Dent's mind. In trying to be Gotham's savior, Batman became an unwitting participant in the birth of Two-Face. Batman's obsession with controlling the city, with imposing absolute moral clarity, made it impossible for Harvey to see the world in any other way. Harvey Dent's split personality, his desire for justice, juxtaposed with his growing belief in the randomness of fate, represents the conflict between Batman's ideals and the reality of Gotham's darkness. Batman's mission to eliminate crime inadvertently gave rise to the man who believes that justice is a flip of a coin. Two-Face is a living embodiment of the fact that Batman's fight against Gotham's moral decay is doomed to create more villains. But the Riddler adds yet another layer to this complex issue. The Riddler's obsession with puzzles, his need to challenge Batman's intellect, reveals the psychological ramifications of Batman's pursuit of control. The Riddler does not just want to commit crimes, he wants to test Batman to prove that Batman is not as infallible as he seems. The Riddler's existence is rooted in Batman's need for intellect, for logic, and for control over every outcome. The more Batman solves the Riddler's puzzles, the more the Riddler is encouraged to create even more complex challenges. The Riddler exists because Batman's need to impose order on Gotham and solve every crime forces him into an endless game of intellectual combat. The Riddler is Batman's creation, born from the very mindset Batman employs to defeat crime. Batman's obsession with logic creates a criminal who thrives on creating disorder through puzzles. In trying to remain ahead of Gotham's criminals, Batman creates a villain whose entire purpose is to challenge his mind, forcing Batman into a game that he cannot truly win. Batman is trapped in a puzzle, one that has no answer. Scarecrow, too, is a creation of Batman's mind. Dr. Jonathan Crane uses fear as his weapon, and Batman is his perfect target. Batman's fear has always driven him. It is the source of his unrelenting need to fight crime, to protect Gotham, to never stop. But it is also the thing that haunts him. Scarecrow uses Batman's own fear against him, forcing him to confront the very thing he cannot control. Scarecrow's existence is a direct consequence of Batman's refusal to confront his deepest insecurities. Batman's fear of failure and his fear of losing Gotham are the very fears that Scarecrow preys on. In trying to fight his own inner darkness, Batman has created a villain who seeks to expose that darkness to the world. Scarecrow forces Batman to face the reality of his own limitations, his fears, and his unwavering need to control everything. In trying to avoid fear, Batman has given rise to a villain whose only weapon is Batman's own weakness. And so, the question remains, is Batman truly creating his own villains? The answer, it seems, is yes. Each of Gotham's most dangerous criminals is not just a product of the city's decay, but a reflection of Batman's own struggles, his fears, his insecurities, and his unwillingness to break free from the cycle of control that defines him. Every time Batman stands against these criminals, he is not just battling a villain, he is battling the darkness within himself, a darkness that he cannot fully confront or escape. Batman, in his attempt to rid Gotham of evil, has created the very evil he cannot overcome. Gotham's criminals are not just embodiments of criminality, they are distorted reflections of Batman's own mind. In trying to impose order on Gotham, Batman has inadvertently created the chaos he fears most. As Batman continues his eternal struggle against the forces of chaos that plague Gotham, a deeper, more complex realization begins to settle in the recesses of his mind. Gotham's darkness has become as much a part of him as his own soul. It's no longer just the criminals he faces that haunt him. It's the very idea that his relentless pursuit of justice may be feeding into the chaos he seeks to eradicate. Gotham's criminals are more than just a nuisance, more than just a source of evil for him to combat. They are, in many ways, a reflection of his own journey. They exist because of him, because of his unyielding drive to rid Gotham of its vices. But in that drive, he has created something far darker than the villains he faces, a never-ending cycle of conflict, where each victory he claims is merely a temporary reprieve before the next enemy rises, more monstrous than the last. Each of Gotham's villains embodies something deeper than the typical criminal mind. They represent extremes of everything Batman stands for, from the Joker's embodiment of chaos, to Two-Face's moral duality, to Scarecrow's exploitation of fear. These villains, in their own twisted ways, are the product of Batman's mission. Each one reflecting an aspect of himself he is either unwilling or unable to confront. And as he continues to battle these monsters, Batman begins to realize that the true battle is not against the criminals of Gotham, but against his own internal contradictions. The Joker, perhaps the most obvious example, is not just a villain created by Gotham's despair, but a villain shaped by Batman's presence. The Joker is an agent of anarchy, a force that seeks to disrupt and destroy all order, all structure, and all meaning. Batman, by standing for order, justice, and discipline, has created the perfect foil for the Joker. In Batman's desire to impose order on the world, he has given rise to the Joker's chaos. Every time Batman defeats the Joker learns from Batman's methods and returns with an even more destructive plan, seeking to prove that order and structure are illusions. The Joker thrives on the instability that Batman's fight for justice creates, just as much as he thrives on Batman's obsession with controlling Gotham. The Joker's primary goal is not to simply defeat Batman, but to destroy the very ideals Batman stands for. The Joker represents everything Batman cannot accept, and in fighting against him, Batman only prolongs the cycle that the Joker is determined to exploit. The Riddler offers another example of this complex dynamic. The Riddler, with his puzzles and intellectual games, represents the challenge to Batman's intellectual superiority. In many ways, Batman's obsession with solving every crime, his need to be the greatest detective, creates the perfect environment for the Riddler to thrive. Every time Batman solves a riddle or outsmarts a criminal, the Riddler is pushed further to prove that he can outwit Batman. The Riddler is not just a criminal, he is a direct challenge to Batman's identity. The more Batman tries to understand Gotham's mysteries, the more he feeds into the Riddler's need to prove his worth. Batman's relentless pursuit of justice forces him into the role of the solver of puzzles, and in doing so, he inadvertently creates a villain whose only purpose is to challenge him intellectually. The Riddler is, in essence, Batman's creation, just as much a product of Gotham's need for order as he is a product of Batman's own psychological need to solve every puzzle. Two-Face is yet another example of the disturbing relationship between Batman's mission and the villains he faces. Harvey Dent, a once promising district attorney, is twisted into the vengeful criminal Two-Face after an encounter with Gotham's criminal underworld. Two-Face's obsession with duality, the flipping of a coin to determine a person's fate, is a reflection of the moral choices Batman is forced to make every day. Batman's inability to kill, his refusal to cross the line, has created an environment in which Harvey's sense of justice becomes fractured. Two-Face exists because of Batman's moral rigidity, his need to impose absolute justice on a city that will never be fully saved. Batman's inflexible approach to crime fighting creates the space for a figure like Two-Face to emerge. Harvey's descent into madness is not just a result of Gotham's corruption, but a direct response to Batman's role in the city's flawed justice system. Batman's refusal to compromise has pushed Harvey Dent into a place where justice no longer has any meaning, where the flip of a coin is as valid a means of determining fate as any. Batman, in his fight to maintain order, has created a figure who believes that justice should be blind to reason, a man whose moral compass was shattered by Batman's own actions. The case of Scarecrow, Dr. Jonathan Crane, is particularly revealing of how Batman's internal struggle with fear has inadvertently created a villain who uses fear itself as a weapon. Batman has always been driven by fear. Fear of losing those he loves, fear of failing his mission, and most fundamentally, fear of becoming what he fights against. But in trying to control his fear, Batman has given rise to a villain whose only purpose is to manipulate others with their own fear. Scarecrow's weapon is a direct reflection of Batman's own inner torment, and in Batman's fight to suppress his own fears, he has created a figure whose primary tool is fear itself. Scarecrow uses fear toxin to force his victims to confront their deepest, most primal fears, the very fears that Batman has never fully faced himself. Batman has created Scarecrow by attempting to control fear rather than accept it. In trying to fight his own psychological demons, he has spawned a villain whose sole goal is to exploit the very things that drive Batman. But it isn't just the villains that Batman creates through his psychological battles. His very presence in Gotham has shaped the entire criminal underworld. The more Batman pushes to rid the city of crime, the more Gotham's criminal element adapts, growing smarter, more dangerous, and more inventive. Gotham's crime bosses, from the Penguin to Black Mask, have learned to operate in a world where Batman's presence ensures that no crime is ever fully safe. But in this adaptation, they become increasingly sophisticated, harder to defeat, and more resistant to Batman's tactics. In a way, Batman's very existence forces Gotham's criminals to evolve, to rise to new heights in their ingenuity and malevolence. The more Batman fights, the more the criminals evolve, and the cycle continues. This self-perpetuating cycle of creation, where Batman's pursuit of justice inadvertently gives rise to even greater threats, is the ultimate tragedy of his mission. Batman cannot escape the reality that every time he stops one threat, he only creates another. Gotham is a city of contradictions, of order and chaos, and Batman, in his obsession with control, has become an integral part of that contradiction. By trying to rid Gotham of its darkness, He has become entrenched in that darkness, creating an environment in which villains are born not just from Gotham's criminal nature, but from his own psychological battles. Gotham's evil does not stem solely from its criminals. It stems from the fact that Batman has, in his desire to impose order, given rise to the very chaos he fights against. The central question is, can Batman ever truly win? Can he rid Gotham of its crime and corruption? Or has he, in his uncompromising mission, only ensured the perpetuation of Gotham's endless darkness? The more Batman tries to fight the darkness, the more he becomes a part of it, and the more the cycle continues. Batman is both the hero and the creator of the villains he faces, and in that duality lies the greatest tragedy of all. His mission is eternal, but it is also futile. Gotham will never be truly free, and neither will Batman. As the endless night falls over Gotham, Batman continues his watch, ever vigilant, a silent protector that rises from the shadows each night to combat the never-ending tide of crime and chaos. But with each victory, each criminal defeated, a darker truth settles in his mind. Could the very battle he wages against Gotham's evil be the thing that sustains that evil? His mission, his unrelenting quest to save Gotham, may be the very thing that ensures its survival in an endless cycle of darkness. Batman is not just fighting criminals. He is fighting a deeper, more insidious force, a force that has been embedded in the fabric of Gotham since its inception. A cycle that continually renews itself, one that Batman himself has become a part of. It's this paradox that is the most disturbing part of Batman's existence. His role as Gotham's protector has made him the very embodiment of the city's contradictions. He is a man driven by the desire for justice, yet his obsessive pursuit of that justice has created a world where crime and corruption can never be fully eradicated. Every time Batman takes down a criminal, another one rises in their place, often more dangerous, more unpredictable. Each new villain is a reflection of his inner battle, whether it's the Joker, who embodies chaos and destruction, or Two-Face, who represents Batman's struggle with the duality of justice. Batman's greatest adversaries are not merely the criminals of Gotham. They are the manifestations of his own fear, his guilt, his struggle with morality. Batman's mission to rid Gotham of evil has become a never-ending struggle, one that he cannot escape. Every time he defeats a villain, he is forced to confront his own limitations, his own moral boundaries. He cannot kill, and in that refusal, he creates the very conditions for the chaos he fears most. The Joker, for example, exists because Batman's refusal to cross the line has allowed him to thrive. The Joker's chaos is a direct challenge to Batman's moral code, and yet, by trying to stop him, Batman only strengthens the Joker's resolve. The Joker needs Batman. Just as much as Batman needs the Joker, their existence is bound to each other. In many ways, Batman creates the Joker through his unwillingness to break his moral code. The Joker's chaos becomes a response to Batman's order, a counterbalance to the very nature of Batman's soul. But the Joker is just one example. Every villain in Batman's rogue gallery is a product of the very mission Batman has chosen to pursue. The Riddler, with his obsession for puzzles and intellect, is the product of Batman's own need for control. Batman's reliance on his detective skills, his intellectual prowess, creates a criminal mind like the Riddler's, one who challenges Batman's intellect at every turn. Each puzzle that the Riddler creates is not just a crime, but a test of Batman's mental strength, forcing Batman to prove that he is the smartest, the most cunning. In trying to impose order, Batman has created a mind that thrives on his own need for structure and logic. Every challenge the Riddler presents is a reflection of Batman's own obsession with solving problems, and in trying to solve the Riddler's riddles, Batman only continues the cycle. Two-Face, too, represents the dark consequences of Batman's desire for control. Harvey Dent's descent into madness after the tragic incident that scarred him physically is a direct result of Batman's presence in Gotham. Harvey, who was once a symbol of hope for Gotham, becomes torn between the ideals of justice and the brutal reality of Gotham's criminal underworld. Batman's uncompromising moral stance creates an environment where Harvey Dent begins to question whether justice can truly be achieved in Gotham. His transformation into Two-Face, a man who flips a coin to determine fate, is the result of the contradictions Batman himself must face. Batman's need for order and control has created the space for Two-Face to be born, a villain who believes that justice is no longer something that can be controlled, but something that is determined by chance. And then there is Scarecrow, who uses fear as a weapon, the very weapon that defines Batman's own internal struggles. Batman has always been driven by fear. Fear of losing those he loves, fear of failing in his mission, and fear of becoming something he despises. Scarecrow, by exploiting Batman's own fear, forces him to face his deepest vulnerabilities, his insecurities, and his inner demons. In his refusal to acknowledge these fears and confront them fully, Batman has created Scarecrow, a villain who is the embodiment of all the fears Batman tries to suppress. Scarecrow's ability to manipulate fear is the manifestation of Batman's own psychological battle, the constant battle to maintain control while being haunted by the very fears that drive him. Every villain in Batman's rogue gallery, from the Penguin to Ra's al Ghul, exists because of Batman's actions, his need for control, his refusal to compromise, and his desire to rid Gotham of evil. These criminals do not just exist in response to Gotham's decay. They are a direct result of Batman's mission. Gotham's criminals are born from the contradictions in Batman's own psyche. The more Batman tries to rid the city of crime, the more he creates the very criminals he seeks to destroy. Every time he defeats a villain, another one rises, stronger and more dangerous than the last. Gotham, it seems, is locked in a never-ending cycle, and Batman is both its savior and its prisoner. This idea of Batman as both the protector and creator of Gotham's criminals is a disturbing truth that Batman has never fully accepted. He has spent his entire life fighting to protect Gotham, to impose order where there is none. But in that very struggle, he has become entrenched in Gotham's darkness. The more he fights for Gotham's soul, the more he creates the very conditions that allow Gotham's criminals to thrive. The city's unresolved darkness is reflected in the villains Batman faces, and the more Batman fights to eliminate that darkness, the more entrenched he becomes in it. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of Batman's existence is that he can never fully rid Gotham of its darkness, because he is entwined in it himself. His fight against crime is a constant reflection of the inner turmoil he faces, his obsession with control, his fear of losing his humanity, and his inability to fully confront the darkness inside him. The more he tries to save Gotham, the more he becomes a part of the very chaos he seeks to destroy. The villains of Gotham are products of Batman's own existence, born from the very ideals and morals that he holds dear. And in his mission to protect the city, Batman only strengthens the very forces he is trying to eliminate. As the decades pass, Gotham continues its unrelenting descent into chaos, but its protector remains unchanged. Batman, the eternal sentinel, guards the city, driven by his vow to never let Gotham succumb to the darkness that festers in its heart. However, with each new foe he faces, Batman is confronted with a disturbing truth. The more he fights to protect Gotham, the more he becomes entwined in the very evil he seeks to eliminate. The cycle is endless, and it feels as though each villain he defeats only gives birth to a new one, more dangerous than the last, as if Gotham itself cannot exist without this balance of order and chaos, both of which are embodied by Batman and his adversaries. The more Batman strives to impose control, the more Gotham's criminals adapt, evolving in ways that reflect Batman's own internal struggles. There's an unsettling thought that keeps creeping into Batman's mind. What if Gotham cannot be saved? And, more importantly, what if Batman himself is the reason Gotham's cycle of violence and crime never ends? Could his very existence be what sustains the criminal underworld he seeks to destroy? It's an idea that Batman has long resisted, but the evidence is undeniable. Each criminal, each villain, seems to mirror an aspect of Batman himself, a distorted reflection of his own psychological battles, his fears, and his deep-seated guilt. Gotham's darkness feeds on Batman's own inner turmoil, and no matter how hard he tries to cleanse the city of its evil, it feels as though the darkness only grows stronger with each passing year. Batman is not simply fighting Gotham's criminals. He is battling against the very nature of his own existence, the contradictions within himself that make him both a hero and the very reason Gotham remains trapped in its endless struggle. Consider the idea of Batman's uncompromising moral code, his refusal to kill. This code is what defines him, what sets him apart from the criminals he faces. Yet it also creates a paradox that fuels Gotham's eternal cycle of crime. Batman's refusal to take a life, even when facing the most dangerous criminals, leaves Gotham's worst offenders alive, giving them the opportunity to return again and again, each time more dangerous than the last. Batman's very moral code becomes a prison, not just for Gotham, but for himself. Every time he refuses to kill, he is giving his enemies another chance to rise again, stronger, more committed to their cause. Batman is trapped in an endless cycle where his refusal to break his own code means that the cycle of crime never truly ends. His fight against Gotham's villains is not just a battle for the city's soul, but a battle against his own limitations. The Joker, for example, is the perfect embodiment of this cycle. Batman's inability to take a life has allowed the Joker's chaotic nature to thrive. The Joker is the manifestation of Batman's greatest fear, that despite all his efforts, Gotham will always be consumed by chaos. Joker is Batman's darkest mirror, a force that seeks to destroy all the principles Batman holds dear. But Batman cannot break free from this cycle because the Joker needs him. Each time Batman defeats the Joker returns, more twisted and dangerous than before, feeding on Batman's moral struggle. In many ways, Batman is complicit in the Joker's existence because his refusal to kill gives the Joker the opportunity to keep returning. Batman's battle against the Joker is not one of just physical conflict, but a battle of ideals, order versus chaos, control versus freedom. Every time Batman fights the Joker, he is fighting a part of himself, a part that refuses to accept the inevitability of Gotham's darkness. The same can be said for Two-Face. Harvey Dent was once a symbol of hope for Gotham, a man who believed in justice and order. But the tragic incident that scarred Harvey, both physically and mentally, turned him into the villainous Two-Face, a man who flips a coin to decide a person's fate, embracing chaos over control. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face is a direct result of Batman's crusade. Batman's pursuit of justice created a world where Harvey's ideal of absolute justice could not survive the chaos of Gotham's criminal underworld. Batman, by trying to impose control, created the space for Harvey to lose his moral compass. Harvey's obsession with duality, his belief in the randomness of justice, is a direct reflection of Batman's inability to reconcile the contradictions of his own code. Batman's strict moral code, his refusal to cross the line, gave Harvey the justification to flip that coin and abandon the moral clarity he once held. In trying to save Gotham, Batman has inadvertently created the very villain who represents the cost of that salvation. The cost of moral rigidity in a world that is anything but rigid. The Riddler, too, is a product of Batman's obsession with control. The Riddler's puzzles and games represent Batman's need for intellect and order, Batman's constant need to solve every case, to outwit every criminal, has given rise to a villain who exists solely to challenge his intellect. The Riddler's existence is a direct response to Batman's intellectual obsession. The more Batman tries to outsmart the criminal minds of Gotham, the more the Riddler pushes him, setting ever more complex puzzles. In trying to solve Gotham's crimes with logic, Batman has created a mind that thrives on confusion and deception. The more Batman wins by intellectual superiority, the more the Riddler adapts, forcing Batman into an endless cycle of mental games that never lead to a final resolution. Batman's need to control every outcome feeds directly into the Riddler's obsession with creating chaos through puzzles. Batman cannot win, not because he is incapable, but because he is locked in a game that never ends. His quest for answers is a trap, one that he unknowingly created through his own desire for control. Scarecrow is another creation of Batman's own psychological conflict. Batman's fear of failure, of losing Gotham, of losing the fight against the darkness that haunts the city, has made him the perfect target for Scarecrow's fear toxin. Batman, a man who has always confronted his fears head-on, has never fully accepted them. Instead, he has always pushed them down, refused to acknowledge how deeply his fears of loss, failure, and becoming like the criminals he fights shape his every decision. Scarecrow uses fear as a weapon that Batman himself has never fully conquered. Scarecrow is the product of Batman's refusal to face his own deepest vulnerabilities. The more Batman tries to control his fears, the more Scarecrow is able to manipulate them. Scarecrow forces Batman to confront his own deepest insecurities, making Batman question whether his fight is worth the cost. In trying to battle his own fear, Batman has created a villain who uses fear to manipulate others, including himself. The cycle that Batman finds himself trapped in is not just a result of Gotham's corruption, it's a result of his own internal battles, his inability to break free from his rigid moral code, and his reluctance to fully confront the fears and contradictions that drive him. Gotham's greatest villains are not just criminals. They are the manifestation of Batman's own psychological war, a war between order and chaos, control and freedom, justice and vengeance. Batman, by trying to fight Gotham's evil, has created the very conditions that allow that evil to thrive. Every victory he claims only perpetuates the cycle, feeding into the very chaos he seeks to eliminate. Gotham, it seems, will never be free, because Batman is both the hero and the villain in its eternal struggle. As Batman stands in the darkness of Gotham's streets, his cape billowing in the wind, he is faced with the ultimate question: can he ever truly save Gotham, or is he doomed to be trapped in a cycle of his own creation? The city will never rest, and neither will he. But as long as the cycle continues, so will the endless battle, and Gotham will remain the eternal reflection of Batman's own inner turmoil. As the dark shadow of Gotham looms over its inhabitants, one thing is certain: Batman is locked in an unending battle, one that cannot be won, not because of his inability to fight, but because of the very nature of the war itself. Gotham is a city built on contradictions. It thrives on crime and chaos, yet it needs a protector to impose some semblance of order. In this complex landscape, Batman's role as the eternal guardian has both created and fed the very forces he seeks to defeat. Gotham's unyielding cycle of crime and villainy is not just a consequence of its corruption, but the direct result of Batman's unyielding presence. Each of Batman's enemies is a reflection of his own inner turmoil, his psychological battles, and his moral dilemmas. Gotham's criminals are not just criminals. They are the distortions of Batman's own psyche, amplified by his unrelenting pursuit of justice. Batman's fight against Gotham's darkness is as much a fight against himself as it is against the villains he faces. The more he tries to rid the city of crime, the more he becomes entrenched in the very darkness he tries to extinguish. Gotham needs Batman, but in many ways, Batman needs Gotham. And that need is what has created the vicious cycle, where neither can truly escape. Let's take the Joker as the perfect example. In their first meeting, Batman encountered not just a criminal, but a force of nature, a man who was a mirror to everything Batman feared. Batman's obsession with order, with control, created the perfect breeding ground for the Joker's chaos. The Joker is the antithesis of everything Batman stands for, and yet the more Batman tries to stop him, the more the Joker's madness grows. Batman's refusal to kill is not just a moral choice. It is a moral prison, one that binds him to the Joker in an endless cycle. Joker's sole purpose is to challenge Batman's principles, to prove that order cannot exist in Gotham. In that sense, the Joker's very existence is Batman's creation. He is the manifestation of Batman's own fear, the fear that Gotham can never be saved, the fear that there is no real justice in a city as corrupt as Gotham. Two-Face serves as another tragic example. Harvey Dent, once a beacon of justice in Gotham, was transformed into a villain after a brutal attack. A transformation that, while exacerbated by Gotham's criminal world, was catalyzed by Batman's presence. The very existence of Two-Face was a result of the moral rigidity Batman's mission imposed on Gotham. Harvey Dent's belief in absolute justice was fractured when Gotham's chaos bled into his world, and Batman's mission to impose control only pushed Dent further into his duality. Two-Face is the product of Batman's refusal to embrace moral complexity, his refusal to understand that Gotham's corruption cannot be eliminated by rigid, unyielding ideals. In trying to impose absolute justice, Batman inadvertently created a figure whose decisions are governed by randomness, chaos, a complete contrast to Batman's obsession with control. And then there's Scarecrow, who is perhaps the most personal adversary for Batman. Scarecrow's use of fear as a weapon is directly tied to Batman's own psychological landscape. Fear is Batman's greatest motivator, the thing that drives him to fight against crime, the thing that keeps him awake at night. But Scarecrow uses fear against Batman. He forces Batman to confront the very fears that haunt him, the fear of failure, the fear of becoming the very thing he's trying to stop, and the fear of losing Gotham to the darkness. In Batman's refusal to confront his own fears, in his need to control the city, he has given rise to a villain who uses fear itself to exploit others, including Batman. Scarecrow is not merely a product of Gotham's criminal underworld, he is a direct manifestation of Batman's own fear. Each time Batman confronts a villain like Scarecrow, he is fighting a battle that is deeply personal, a battle against his own inner demons. But what if the true enemy Batman is fighting is not just the criminals of Gotham, but the very darkness inside himself? Batman's refusal to let go of his moral code, his unwavering desire to impose order, and his obsession with controlling the outcome of every situation all contribute to the villains he faces. Gotham's greatest criminals are not just born from the city's corruption, they are born from Batman's own psychological limitations. Gotham's darkness is in many ways a reflection of Batman's inability to fully accept the chaos within himself. The Riddler, too, is a product of Batman's intellectual obsession. Batman's need to solve every puzzle, to outsmart every criminal, has created the perfect environment for the Riddler to thrive. The Riddler's riddles and puzzles are not just challenges for Batman's intellect, they are a direct challenge to Batman's sense of control. The Riddler is not just a criminal mastermind, he is a counterbalance to Batman's methodical approach to crime solving. Every time Batman solves one of the Riddler's puzzles, it's a small victory, but it also reinforces the fact that Batman is trapped in an endless game, where the goal is not really to win, but to prove that he is better than the chaos that surrounds him. It is in this cycle that Batman begins to realize that his war on crime is a war against his own identity. Each villain he faces is a reflection of the psychological conflict that he has never fully resolved. The Joker, Two-Face, the Riddler, Scarecrow. They are all parts of the same equation, parts of the same struggle between order and chaos, control and freedom, justice and vengeance. In his fight to impose order on Gotham, Batman has created the very conditions for these villains to rise. Every action he takes to rid Gotham of evil only feeds the chaos that makes Gotham's underworld thrive. Batman cannot escape the truth. His very obsession with justice has created a city where crime is a constant, and in his efforts to rid Gotham of its darkness, he has inadvertently become part of that darkness. Is Gotham's eternal battle between Batman and his villains a war that can ever truly end? Every time Batman defeats a villain, it seems like another one rises in their place, stronger and more twisted than before. Gotham's greatest criminals are not just a consequence of the city's crime, they are the products of Batman's mission. Batman's desire for order, his refusal to compromise, his need to control, have all contributed to the creation of the very chaos he fights against. Each villain is a distorted mirror of Batman's own inner conflict, and as long as Batman continues his fight, the cycle will continue. And so, Batman is caught in an eternal struggle. A struggle against not just Gotham's criminals, but against his own limitations. As long as Gotham needs him, he will continue to fight. But the question remains, can Batman ever truly rid Gotham of its darkness, or has he, in his pursuit of justice, become part of that darkness? The more he battles against the evil that haunts Gotham, the more he becomes entwined in it. And perhaps the greatest tragedy of all is that, in his fight to save Gotham, Batman has created the very monsters he cannot escape. As the years pass, and Gotham continues to fight its endless battle with crime, one constant remains: Batman. His presence looms over the city like a dark shadow, always watching, always waiting for the next villain to rise, the next threat to face. But in the quiet moments between the chaos, Batman begins to question something fundamental about his existence. Is his role as Gotham's protector truly saving the city, or is he merely prolonging its suffering? At its core, Gotham is a city defined by conflict, the battle between order and chaos, justice and corruption, light and darkness. And at the heart of this conflict stands Batman, a man who has dedicated his life to imposing his version of order on a city that has never known peace. But the more Batman fights, the more he begins to realize that he is not the solution to Gotham's problems. He is part of the problem itself. His fight to impose order has given rise to the very darkness he seeks to defeat. Gotham's villains, from the Joker to Two-Face to Scarecrow, are not just criminals. They are manifestations of Batman's own internal struggles, the darkest parts of his psyche that he has never fully confronted. It's easy to blame Gotham's criminals for the city's suffering. But what if Batman's crusade to rid the city of evil is actually the force that perpetuates its corruption? Every time Batman defeats a villain, another one rises, often stronger and more dangerous than the last. Every time he tries to impose order on Gotham, he inadvertently creates the conditions for even greater chaos. Gotham needs Batman, yes, but in his attempt to save the city, Batman has become the architect of its eternal struggle. The more he tries to protect Gotham from itself, the more he becomes trapped in a cycle of violence that has no end. Consider the Joker, Batman's most infamous adversary. The Joker is more than just a villain. He is a force of nature, a being who thrives on chaos and destruction. But Joker's existence is not a random occurrence. He is the mirror image of Batman's deepest fear, that no matter how hard he tries to impose order, the world will always descend into chaos. The Joker is the embodiment of the chaos Batman cannot control, the darkness that lurks within Gotham and within himself. Every time Batman tries to stop the Joker grows stronger, more unpredictable, more determined to prove that Batman's fight for order is futile. The Joker's very existence is tied to Batman's refusal to accept that Gotham cannot be saved, that it is a city defined by its contradictions, a place where chaos is as much a part of its fabric as order. Batman's attempts to rid Gotham of the Joker are futile because the Joker exists as a direct response to Batman's own need for control. The more Batman seeks to impose order on Gotham, the more the Joker's chaos is amplified. It's a vicious cycle, one that Batman cannot break free from. Then there's Two-Face, another tragic figure, whose transformation from Gotham's golden boy into a villain is directly tied to Batman's presence in the city. Harvey Dent, the district attorney, was once a man of unwavering moral certainty, but after a horrific incident at the hands of Gotham's criminal element, Harvey's moral compass was shattered. The catalyst for his descent into madness was not just the crime he witnessed, but Batman's uncompromising moral code. Batman's war on crime, his relentless pursuit of justice, created the space for Harvey's sense of right and wrong to be torn apart. Two-Face's obsession with duality, the flipping of a coin to determine a person's fate, is a reflection of Batman's own internal battle. Batman's refusal to kill, his unwavering belief in justice, forced Harvey to see the world in terms of black and white, right and wrong. But when the reality of Gotham's corruption began to seep in, Harvey's rigid sense of justice fractured, and he became a man of chance, someone who believed that justice could only be served through randomness. In his efforts to fight Gotham's evil, Batman created the conditions for Harvey's transformation. Batman's moral rigidity created the environment in which Two-Face's duality could take root. And then there's Scarecrow, who uses fear as his weapon. Batman has always been driven by fear, fear of failing, fear of becoming like the criminals he fights, fear of losing Gotham. But Batman has never truly faced his fears. Instead, he has suppressed them, used them as fuel for his fight against crime. But in doing so, he has created a villain who exploits fear, not just the fear of Gotham's citizens, but the fear that Batman himself cannot escape. Scarecrow is the personification of Batman's inability to confront his own deepest fears, and in trying to fight Scarecrow, Batman is not just battling a criminal, but his own psychological demons. The more Batman tries to suppress his own fear, the more Scarecrow's power grows. Scarecrow is a reminder that, no matter how much Batman fights, he can never fully escape the fear that drives him, the fear that has become part of his identity. The same can be said for the Riddler, a villain who challenges Batman's intellect at every turn. Batman's obsession with solving every puzzle, with outwitting every criminal, has created the perfect environment for a mind like the Riddler's to thrive. The Riddler's riddles are not just crimes to be solved. They are tests of Batman's intellect, challenges to Batman's need for control. The more Batman tries to solve the Riddler's puzzles, the more he feeds into the very need for validation that the Riddler craves. In trying to prove his superiority, Batman has created a villain whose purpose is to outsmart him at every turn. The Riddler, like so many of Gotham's criminals, exists because Batman has created the environment for him to thrive. Batman's obsession with control creates the space for chaos to breed in the form of criminals who challenge his every move. Batman is trapped in a cycle of constant conflict, and the more he strives to impose order, the more chaos spreads. But what does this mean for Batman? Can he ever truly escape the cycle? Gotham's need for him, his own obsession with justice, and his uncompromising moral code all feed into the darkness he seeks to destroy. Every time he defeats a villain, another one rises, more dangerous and more cunning than before. The city's suffering never ends, and neither does Batman's fight. In many ways, Batman's immortality is tied to the never-ending cycle of violence in Gotham. He is both the protector and the prisoner of the city. His refusal to kill, his unwavering desire to control, and his obsession with justice have all created the very conditions that ensure Gotham will never be free. Perhaps the most tragic part of Batman's mission is that he will never truly win. The battle he fights is eternal. Every time he wins, he creates the conditions for a new enemy to rise. Gotham's darkness feeds off Batman's quest for justice, and in that pursuit, Batman becomes part of the darkness itself. He is both the savior and the destroyer of Gotham, and in his attempts to cleanse the city, he perpetuates its suffering. The villains Batman faces are not just criminals. They are reflections of his own struggles, his moral contradictions, and his psychological limitations. And as long as Gotham's darkness exists, Batman will continue to fight, trapped in an eternal struggle that he can never truly win. Batman's ongoing struggle in Gotham is not just a war against crime, but an existential battle. Every night, he faces criminals who test his physical strength, intellect, and willpower. However, the most dangerous of these adversaries are the ones that force him to confront his inner darkness. Gotham's criminals are symptoms of a deeper issue. They reflect aspects of Batman's own psyche, his refusal to kill, his obsessive need to impose order, and his inability to fully confront his own fears have all contributed to the creation of the very chaos he fights to eradicate. The city's cycle of crime and corruption has become a reflection of his unyielding drive, a cycle that Batman cannot escape. It is easy to blame Gotham's criminals for the suffering that plagues the city, but Batman's role in this suffering cannot be overlooked. He is not merely reacting to the criminality of Gotham, but he is deeply connected to it. In trying to protect the city, Batman has made himself part of the problem. His presence has created the conditions for chaos to thrive. With every action he takes to eliminate crime, he inadvertently fosters new criminal activity. Gotham's villains, from the Joker to Two-Face, the Riddler, and others, exist because of Batman's unwavering stance on justice. Batman's fight for order has created the very criminals he faces. The Joker is perhaps the most glaring example of this. He is not just a criminal, but a force of nature, a chaotic entity born from Batman's refusal to embrace the reality of Gotham's darkness. The Joker thrives on the disruption of order, a disruption that Batman's presence only amplifies. The Joker does not seek power or money. He seeks to destroy Batman's code. His madness is a direct response to Batman's need to impose order. Each time Batman defeats the Joker returns with even more destructive plans, proving that Batman's insistence on justice and order only feeds the Joker's chaos. The Joker is a reflection of Batman's fear, the fear that Gotham will never truly be saved, no matter how hard he tries. The more Batman fights for order, the more the Joker's chaos flourishes. And yet, Batman's refusal to kill, his code of non-lethal justice, is not just a noble ideal. It is the root cause of Gotham's ongoing turmoil. Every time Batman spares a criminal, every time he chooses justice over vengeance, he allows the very forces he fights to live on. The Joker, Two-Face, and others come back, each time more dangerous than before. Batman's unwavering moral code ensures that Gotham will never be free of crime. The very act of mercy that Batman extends to Gotham's criminals is the same act that keeps them alive. The Joker thrives on the fact that Batman cannot kill him, and each time Batman allows his enemies to live, they rise again more powerful and more vengeful. Two-Face's tragic transformation is another stark example of how Batman's mission inadvertently creates his own enemies. Harvey Dent, once Gotham's shining example of justice, was corrupted by the city's own crime-ridden nature. But Batman's strict moral code, his refusal to kill, his inability to compromise his ideals, contributed to Harvey's fall. Harvey Dent was a man who believed in absolute justice, but Gotham's corruption was too much for him to handle. And in the fracture of his own beliefs, Harvey's sense of justice split, and he became the duality that defines Two-Face. Batman's refusal to take the lives of Gotham's criminals created an environment where Harvey could no longer reconcile the two sides of his own morality. The city's darkness and Batman's inflexible stance created the perfect storm for Two-Face's tragic fall. The Riddler, too, thrives on Batman's inability to control every situation. Batman's obsession with solving puzzles and outwitting criminals has given rise to a mind that challenges him at every turn. The Riddler's very existence is a direct response to Batman's need for intellectual superiority. Batman has always prided himself on being the world's greatest detective, solving crimes with methodical precision. But the more Batman strives for logical perfection, the more the Riddler is able to set puzzles that push Batman to the edge. The Riddler is not just a criminal mastermind, he is Batman's intellectual equal, a challenge that forces Batman to confront his own limitations. Batman's need for control over Gotham's criminal world creates the perfect environment for the Riddler's genius to thrive. Batman feeds into the Riddler's games, and in doing so, he perpetuates the cycle of mental games that never end. Scarecrow, on the other hand, is a product of Batman's own inner fears. Batman's most powerful weapon is his fear, the fear of losing those he loves, the fear of failing in his mission, and most fundamentally, the fear of becoming just like the criminals he fights. But Batman's refusal to fully acknowledge and face his fears has allowed Scarecrow to thrive. Scarecrow uses Batman's fear of failure against him, forcing Batman to confront the very thing that drives him, the possibility of Gotham's collapse. The more Batman suppresses his deep-seated fear, the more Scarecrow's fear toxin becomes a weapon that can break him down. Batman's greatest strength, his ability to fight fear, becomes his greatest weakness because he has never fully faced the darkness within. Scarecrow is Batman's mirror, exploiting the one thing that Batman cannot defeat, his own fear. The tragedy of Batman's existence is that the war he fights is a war he can never win. The more he tries to impose order on Gotham, the more he feeds the chaos that has always existed within it. Gotham is a city built on contradictions, and Batman is both the hero and the villain in this eternal struggle. He is the city's protector, but in that role, he has become the very thing he seeks to destroy. Each victory Batman claims is temporary, and each time he defeats a villain, another one rises to take their place, more dangerous than before. Batman cannot escape the darkness of Gotham because he is bound to it. His very existence has created a cycle of conflict that cannot be broken. Every villain Batman faces is a distorted reflection of his own psyche. The Joker, with his chaos, is a reflection of Batman's fear of failure. Two-Face, with his duality, is a product of Batman's rigid moral code. The Riddler, with his intellect, challenges Batman's need for control. Scarecrow is a manifestation of Batman's inner fears, a reminder that, despite all his strength, Batman is still haunted by the darkness he tries to suppress. And yet, every time Batman defeats a villain, he inadvertently creates another. Gotham's darkness is not just a product of the criminals who lurk in its shadows. It is a product of Batman's own internal battles, his refusal to embrace the chaos that defines the city. The weight of Batman's mission has never been clearer to him, yet the more he tries to escape it, the deeper he becomes embedded in the very chaos he seeks to eliminate. Gotham, a city filled with dark alleys, towering skyscrapers, and endless suffering, is not just a backdrop to his struggle, but a living, breathing force that seems to have a soul of its own. It thrives on conflict, and Batman is the very catalyst of that conflict. The more he tries to clean Gotham's streets, the more he realizes that his own actions have only strengthened the forces he opposes. Every victory, every criminal brought to justice, only seems to breed more chaos, more villains who embody the very essence of the darkness Batman has yet to conquer, the darkness within himself. The cycle Batman is trapped in is a perpetual loop where his commitment to justice creates the very chaos he fights against. His desire to rid Gotham of its criminals, his refusal to kill, his insistence on following a rigid moral code are all reasons why Gotham cannot be saved. Batman's mission has become both his purpose and his prison. Every time he defeats a criminal, the cycle resets, another villain rises, and another conflict begins. Gotham cannot exist without crime, and Batman cannot exist without the criminals he has made. It's as if the city needs Batman to remain in this eternal struggle, just as much as Batman needs the city to fight for. Every criminal in Gotham is a reflection of Batman's deepest fears. They are not just villains. They are manifestations of his psyche, twisted versions of his unresolved conflicts. The Joker, with his pure madness, represents Batman's fear of becoming something he despises. Two-Face, with his obsession for duality, is a direct result of Batman's uncompromising moral stance. The Riddler, with his intellectual challenges, is a consequence of Batman's need to always be in control and to solve every puzzle. Scarecrow, who wields fear as his weapon, is the embodiment of Batman's own inability to confront his deepest insecurities. Gotham's most dangerous villains are not just products of the city's crime, but of Batman's own limitations and fears. The Joker is perhaps the clearest example of this cycle. Each time Batman defeats the Joker returns, only more powerful and more dangerous than before. Batman's inability to kill, his refusal to take the life of even the most dangerous criminals, is the very thing that allows the Joker to rise again. Batman's moral code keeps the Joker alive, enabling the Joker's chaos to continue. The Joker is Batman's dark mirror, a reflection of the fear that Gotham cannot be saved, the fear that there is no true order in the world. In trying to impose order, Batman creates the very force that defies that order. The Joker thrives on the fact that Batman cannot kill him, and with each encounter, the Joker only grows more dangerous, more relentless. But the Joker is not the only villain born from Batman's own actions. Every criminal Batman faces is a product of the environment he's helped create. His moral rigidity, his refusal to kill, and his obsession with justice create the conditions in which these villains can rise. The more Batman tries to force Gotham into a mold of order, the more the city responds with increasingly complex and dangerous adversaries. Two-Face's transformation is a direct result of Batman's unyielding moral code. Harvey Dent was once a man of justice, but in Batman's effort to create a perfect system of justice, he unwittingly forced Harvey into the belief that justice could only be achieved through randomness. By refusing to acknowledge the moral complexities of Gotham, Batman created the conditions for Two-Face's birth. In trying to be Gotham's savior, Batman became the instrument of Harvey Dent's downfall, a man who was once a symbol of hope, but now a reflection of Batman's own fear of failure. The Riddler is another example of how Batman's obsession with control creates a villain who thrives on uncertainty. Batman's need to solve every puzzle and outwit every criminal feeds directly into the Riddler's obsession with intellect and games. The Riddler challenges Batman not only to solve crimes, but to question his own assumptions about the world. Every puzzle is a test, and every test forces Batman to confront his own limitations. The more Batman thinks he's solved the crime, the more the Riddler pushes him to question his own methods. The Riddler exists because Batman's need to control every situation creates a mind that thrives on disrupting that control. In trying to outsmart Gotham's criminals, Batman has created a mind that can outsmart him, someone whose only goal is to prove that Batman's pursuit of order is futile. Scarecrow is a direct manifestation of Batman's own psychological conflict. Batman has always used fear as a motivator. Fear of failure, fear of losing Gotham, and fear of becoming what he fights against. Scarecrow, by weaponizing fear, forces Batman to confront his own inner demons. Batman's inability to fully acknowledge and confront his fears has led to the creation of Scarecrow, a villain who uses Batman's fear against him. Every time Batman fights Scarecrow, he is not just fighting a villain, he is fighting the darkness within himself. Scarecrow represents everything Batman cannot control: the uncertainty of the future, the chaos that lies within. And yet, Batman's fear is the one thing that Scarecrow cannot defeat, because it is also the thing that fuels Batman's mission. In trying to suppress his own fear, Batman has given rise to a villain who thrives on it. The cycle Batman faces is not just one of external conflict. It is a battle against himself. Gotham's villains are not merely reflections of criminality, but of Batman's own internal struggles. His obsession with justice, his unwillingness to compromise, and his need for control all contribute to the creation of Gotham's most dangerous criminals. Gotham's greatest criminals are not simply a result of the city's corruption. They are a reflection of Batman's own contradictions. Every time Batman fights for order, he creates the very conditions for chaos to grow. Batman's internal battle is one of moral absolutism versus the reality of Gotham's corruption. He has created a city where crime is never fully eradicated, not because of his failure, but because he has never fully confronted the contradictions of his own existence. Every time Batman tries to eliminate evil, he creates the very space for it to grow, just as Gotham's criminals adapt to the presence of their greatest foe. Batman's war is endless, and Gotham's darkness feeds into it, as if the city's very soul is tied to the cycle of conflict he perpetuates. The most chilling realization for Batman is that, perhaps, Gotham cannot be saved. Not because he lacks the strength or the will to fight, but because he is the very force that keeps the darkness alive. Batman's mission to rid Gotham of crime is ultimately futile, as each villain he defeats simply makes way for the next. Gotham needs its protector, but it also needs the chaos that Batman's existence ensures. Gotham cannot truly be free of crime because Batman is locked in a war that will never end. In the stillness of the Batcave, Batman stands before his collection of monitors, his sharp eyes scanning the screens, waiting for the next emergency, the next villain to rise. The world outside is dark, filled with the shadows of criminals, and Batman is ever vigilant. But as he watches over the city, the unrelenting truth begins to weigh heavier on his mind. The cycle that binds him to Gotham is not only about crime fighting, it is a cycle that he cannot escape. A cycle that Gotham will never break free from. Batman is no longer just fighting for justice. He is fighting against his own existence, against the very nature of the mission he has dedicated his life to. For all his intelligence, strength, and willpower, Batman has become a part of the problem in Gotham. He was meant to be its protector, but over time, he has become its central paradox. Every action he takes to enforce order in the city creates the conditions for further chaos. Gotham is a city born from contradictions, and in trying to impose a rigid structure of justice, Batman has helped to shape Gotham into the very reflection of his own internal struggles. The more he fights for Gotham's soul, the more he feeds into its corruption. Every time Batman defeats a criminal, Gotham adapts and produces a new enemy, more unpredictable, more dangerous than the last. The more Batman fights crime, the more he is drawn into a psychological battle that extends far beyond the criminal underworld. Gotham's criminals, particularly those who are Batman's greatest adversaries, are not just products of the city's decline. They are psychological extensions of Batman himself, representing the very aspects of his psyche that he has spent years trying to suppress. The Joker, Two-Face, the Riddler, and Scarecrow are not just villains. They are manifestations of Batman's fears, his guilt, his moral contradictions, and his unresolved trauma. Gotham's chaos is a direct consequence of Batman's mission, because his fight for order has created the very darkness he cannot destroy. Every villain he faces is not just an external threat, but a reflection of the inner darkness he cannot confront. Take the Joker, for instance. The Joker is a reflection of Batman's greatest fear, the fear that order cannot exist in Gotham, the fear that no matter how hard he tries, the city will always be consumed by chaos. The Joker represents everything Batman is afraid of: the unpredictability of the world, the lack of meaning in his fight, and the total collapse of the moral structure Batman has created. The Joker exists to prove that Batman's moral code is meaningless, that Gotham cannot be saved by one man's uncompromising ideals. But the more Batman tries to stop the Joker, the more he feeds the Joker's madness. The Joker thrives on Batman's fear, on the fact that Batman cannot kill him. Batman's refusal to cross the line, to take a life, is the very thing that sustains the Joker. With each encounter, Batman is not just fighting a maniacal criminal, he is battling his own inability to accept Gotham's inherent chaos. In trying to force the world into a box of good and evil, Batman has given rise to a villain who seeks to show him that the world is far more complicated than his moral code can allow. The Riddler offers another dark reflection of Batman's need for control. Batman prides himself on his intellect, on his ability to solve any case, outsmart any criminal, but the Riddler challenges this notion at every turn. The Riddler's obsession with puzzles and riddles is a direct consequence of Batman's need to be the smartest, to always have the answer. Every puzzle the Riddler creates is a test of Batman's intellect, a challenge to his control over Gotham. The more Batman tries to outsmart the Riddler, the more he feeds into the Riddler's game. The Riddler's existence is a manifestation of Batman's obsessive need to solve every problem, to control every outcome. By trying to control the narrative of Gotham's criminal underworld, Batman has created a villain whose primary goal is to challenge his intellect and prove that Batman cannot control everything. In solving the Riddler's puzzles, Batman only reinforces the cycle that makes the Riddler's game endless. Two-Face offers yet another tragic reflection of Batman's rigid sense of morality. Harvey Dent, before his transformation, was a man of unwavering justice, a figure of hope in Gotham. But his tragic fall into madness came as a result of Gotham's own contradictions. Batman's unyielding commitment to absolute justice created the environment in which Harvey could no longer see the world in shades of gray. Harvey's moral duality is a product of Batman's own moral rigidity. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face is not just a response to Gotham's criminality, but a response to Batman's refusal to acknowledge the complexities of justice. Batman's inability to accept that sometimes justice cannot be black and white creates the space for Harvey's belief in the randomness of fate to take root. Two-Face's coin flip, the randomness with which he metes out justice, is a direct rejection of Batman's strict moral code, a code that Harvey once believed in. Batman's refusal to compromise created the conditions for Two-Face's madness. Scarecrow, too, is a reflection of Batman's internal struggle with fear. That man has always been motivated by fear. The fear of Gotham's collapse, the fear of losing his loved ones, the fear of becoming the very thing he fights against. But Batman has never fully confronted these fears. Instead, he has suppressed them, allowing them to drive his every decision. Scarecrow uses fear as his weapon because Batman has never fully faced his own. Scarecrow forces Batman to confront his deepest vulnerabilities, his fears of failure and loss, and in doing so, Scarecrow becomes a mirror to Batman's own mind. Scarecrow exploits Batman's unresolved fear, using it against him. Batman's refusal to embrace his own vulnerability has given rise to a villain who manipulates others with their own fears, a villain whose only purpose is to force Batman to acknowledge his deepest insecurities. In trying to fight his own fear, Batman has created a villain whose only weapon is that fear. These villains are not just figures that Batman must defeat, they are parts of himself that he cannot escape. They are manifestations of his psychological conflicts, his fears, his moral contradictions. Gotham's criminals feed on Batman's own unresolved issues, and in his attempts to eliminate them, Batman only strengthens the very forces he seeks to destroy. Batman's fight is not just a battle for Gotham's soul, it is a battle for his own soul. The cycle that he is trapped in is endless, because Batman refuses to confront the deeper darkness within himself. Every time he fights a villain, he is not just fighting a criminal, he is fighting his own inner demons. The tragic reality is that Batman cannot break free from the cycle he has created. As long as Gotham exists, as long as Batman wears the mask and continues his crusade, the villains will continue to rise. Batman has created his own enemies, and in trying to destroy them, he is not just fighting for Gotham's future, he is fighting for his own soul. But as the cycle continues, Batman begins to understand something fundamental: he will never truly be free. Gotham's darkness is a part of him, just as the villains he faces are reflections of his own psyche. The war will never end, because it is not just Gotham that is trapped, it is Batman himself. Gotham's streets never truly sleep. Even in the quietest moments, its darkness lingers, waiting to swallow up any semblance of peace. For Batman, the weight of this city's endless struggle grows heavier with each passing night. He has spent years facing Gotham's most dangerous criminals, the very villains that seem to be born from the city's darkness, and from his own fractured mind. But the real question lies not in the fight against crime, it lies in the battle for Batman's own soul. Is he truly Gotham's savior, or has he unwittingly become a part of its eternal conflict? Every time Batman defeats a villain, the city adapts, breeding more and more powerful adversaries. The cycle he's trapped in is not just one of violence and vengeance, it's a cycle of creation, one where his very presence fuels the chaos. Each of Gotham's greatest villains, from the Joker to Two-Face, from the Riddler to Scarecrow, is a reflection of Batman's own internal struggles. These criminals do not merely embody the darkness of Gotham, they are the distorted projections of Batman's mind, his fears, his weaknesses, and his unresolved guilt. In trying to rid the city of evil, Batman has created the perfect breeding ground for these monsters, each one born from his uncompromising sense of justice and his fear of becoming the very thing he fights against. The Joker, for instance, is not just a villain. He is the embodiment of chaos, an agent of destruction who challenges Batman's very worldview. Batman is a man who has spent his life trying to impose order on Gotham's chaos, yet the Joker thrives on that very chaos, a force of nature that exists to test Batman's limits. Every time Batman tries to defeat the Joker, he finds himself locked in a battle not just against crime, but against his own deepest fears. The fear that the world cannot be fixed, the fear that Gotham's chaos cannot be contained, and the fear that he himself might become lost in that very chaos. The Joker is a reflection of Batman's inability to truly control the darkness of Gotham, a constant reminder that, no matter how much Batman tries to maintain order, chaos will always be lurking, waiting for its chance to take over. Two-Face, too, is a product of Batman's moral rigidity. Harvey Dent was once Gotham's shining symbol of justice, but his descent into madness was triggered by the violence and corruption that has always run rampant in the city. Batman's obsession with justice and his refusal to compromise on his moral code created an environment where Harvey's rigid sense of right and wrong could not survive the unpredictable chaos of Gotham. Batman's refusal to embrace the complexities of morality and his unwavering stance on justice created the conditions for Two-Face's birth. Harvey's transformation into a man who decides fate through the flip of a coin is not just a response to the violence of Gotham, but a reaction to Batman's inability to acknowledge the shades of gray that define the city's existence. Two-Face is a tragic figure who represents Batman's fear that justice cannot be absolute, that even the most well-intentioned men can be broken by the weight of Gotham's darkness. And then there's Scarecrow, whose fear toxin is designed to exploit the very thing that drives Batman, his fear. Batman has always been motivated by the fear of losing Gotham, the fear of failing his mission, the fear of becoming like the criminals he hunts. Scarecrow forces Batman to confront these fears head-on, and in doing so, Batman's greatest strength becomes his greatest weakness. Scarecrow's toxin makes Batman face his own vulnerabilities, his deepest insecurities, and his guilt over the sacrifices he's made in his war against crime. But in confronting his fears, Batman gains strength, and Scarecrow's ability to manipulate fear is inherently tied to Batman's own ability to control it. Scarecrow is, in a way, a reflection of Batman's unresolved psychological battle, a constant reminder that no matter how much Batman tries to suppress his fears, they are always waiting, lurking, to be used against him. The Riddler takes a different approach, challenging Batman's intellect and need for control. Batman is known for his brilliant detective skills, his ability to solve the most complicated cases, and yet the Riddler challenges him in ways that go beyond physical confrontation. The Riddler's puzzles are not just crimes to be solved, but tests of Batman's ego. Every riddle, every puzzle the Riddler presents is an invitation to prove that Batman is the smartest, the most logical, the one who can untangle the twisted webs of crime. The Riddler exists because Batman's need to control and outsmart the world around him has created a mind that thrives on disruption. In trying to solve every puzzle, Batman becomes part of the game, proving that he is in fact a player in the Riddler's twisted world. The more Batman solves, the more the Riddler adapts, and the cycle of challenge continues. The Riddler is not just a reflection of Batman's intelligence, but of his need for perfection, his fear of being outwitted, and his obsession with solving every problem. Batman's mission, then, is not just about defeating criminals. It is a constant struggle to confront the darkest parts of himself, to face his own fears, flaws, and psychological conflicts. Every villain he faces is a mirror, showing him the parts of himself that he refuses to acknowledge. The Joker forces him to confront the chaos within. Two-Face forces him to question the rigidity of his moral code. Scarecrow makes him face his deepest insecurities, and the Riddler challenges his intellect and need for control. Batman cannot defeat these enemies because they are not just criminals, they are representations of his own internal battles. The more Batman tries to rid Gotham of crime, the more he feeds into the very chaos that defines it. Gotham, like Batman, is caught in an endless cycle. Gotham's darkness is not just the result of its crime, it is the result of the darkness inside Batman himself. Batman has become both the protector and the creator of Gotham's villains. The more he tries to impose order, the more the city responds with unpredictable chaos. The city cannot exist without its darkness, and neither can Batman. His refusal to kill, his unyielding moral code, and his inability to confront the inner turmoil he hides have created the very world he fights to protect. Gotham's greatest threat is not just its criminals, but the fact that Batman's presence has made him part of the very problem. As long as Batman continues to fight for Gotham's soul, the cycle will never end. Gotham cannot be free from crime, just as Batman cannot be free from the darkness that has been created within him. The fight for Gotham's soul is not a fight against its criminals, but against the very nature of Batman's existence. The question becomes, is it even possible for Gotham to be saved? Can Batman ever truly rid the city of its darkness, or will he always be trapped in this never-ending battle, a battle that he himself has helped create? Gotham's fate is inextricably tied to Batman's own fate, and as long as he remains its protector, the cycle of violence, chaos, and redemption will continue. In the cold, quiet recesses of the Batcave, Batman stands alone, staring out at the lights of Gotham below. The city stretches out before him, a chaotic, ever-changing landscape filled with corruption, crime, and decay. And yet, despite all the darkness, Batman remains. He remains as a symbol of order, but with each passing night, he begins to feel the weight of his own paradox. Gotham needs him to be its protector, its beacon of hope, yet his very presence seems to breed the villains he must fight against. Every time Batman fights to save Gotham, he finds that he is fighting a battle he cannot win. Each time he defeats a criminal, he inadvertently creates the space for a new, more dangerous threat to rise. The more he fights for Gotham's soul, the more the city descends into chaos, as if Gotham's evil is a constant that feeds off Batman's own mission. As Batman reflects on this endless battle, the haunting question arises: is Gotham a city that can ever truly be saved? The city has long been consumed by its own darkness, a darkness that Batman himself has shaped. He has dedicated his life to ridding the city of evil, but in doing so, he has become a part of the evil he seeks to destroy. Gotham's criminals are not simply products of a broken system. They are reflections of Batman's own internal battles. Every time he steps out into the night to fight crime, Batman is not just battling external forces, but is also fighting the darkness within himself, the fear, the obsession, the insecurity, and the guilt that fuel his mission. The cycle that Batman finds himself trapped in is a deeply psychological one. Gotham's greatest villains, the Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, the Riddler, and others, are not just born from the city's criminal underworld, they are manifestations of Batman's own psyche. Gotham's chaos, its constant state of struggle, and its endless supply of criminals are all consequences of Batman's refusal to let go. His refusal to break his moral code, his obsession with order, and his unyielding desire to control. Batman's need to impose justice on Gotham has inadvertently created the very criminals he fights. With every villain Batman faces, there is a dark reflection of his own psyche, a twisted version of the very qualities that define him as Gotham's protector. The Joker is the most obvious and terrifying example of this. The Joker is not merely a villain, but an agent of chaos, a force that seeks to tear apart everything Batman believes in. Batman fights for order, for justice, and for control. But the Joker thrives in chaos. The Joker's madness is the mirror image of Batman's fear, the fear that no matter how hard he tries, Gotham will always be consumed by darkness. The Joker is Batman's greatest adversary because he is everything Batman is not, everything Batman cannot control. And yet, in trying to fight the Joker, Batman feeds into the Joker's chaos. The Joker's existence is a direct consequence of Batman's refusal to compromise, his refusal to accept that the world is unpredictable, that justice is not always achievable, and that Gotham can never be truly saved. The Joker is Batman's shadow, a reflection of the fear Batman has never been able to overcome. Two-Face is another tragic product of Batman's uncompromising sense of justice. Harvey Dent, a man of absolute moral certainty, was fractured by Gotham's corruption, a fracture that was only made worse by Batman's own pursuit of perfect justice. Batman's need to impose order, his refusal to compromise, and his rigid moral code created a situation in which Harvey Dent could not reconcile his ideals with the brutal reality of Gotham's criminal underworld. Batman's moral absolutism pushed Harvey to a place where he could no longer see the world as a place of black and white, where justice could be applied with certainty. Harvey's transformation into Two-Face, the man who flips a coin to decide fate, is a direct consequence of Batman's own inability to embrace the complexities of morality. Batman's obsession with controlling the outcome of every situation created the conditions for Harvey's moral breakdown. Harvey believed in justice, but Batman's inflexible sense of justice pushed him into the belief that justice was governed by chance, a chance that Batman could never fully control. Scarecrow, too, is a reflection of Batman's psychological conflict. Scarecrow's use of fear as a weapon is the perfect mirror for Batman's own relationship with fear. Batman's entire mission is driven by fear, the fear of losing Gotham, the fear of failure, and the fear of becoming like the criminals he fights against. But instead of confronting these fears, Batman has chosen to suppress them, to fight them with discipline and control. Scarecrow, however, forces Batman to face those fears head-on. Batman's own internal darkness, his fears, insecurities, and guilt are what Scarecrow manipulates to break Batman down. Scarecrow's fear toxin makes Batman confront the very emotions he has spent his life trying to avoid. Scarecrow is Batman's deepest fear made tangible, the fear that no matter how much he tries to control the city, the darkness will always remain both within him and within Gotham. The Riddler offers another unsettling reflection of Batman's mind. Batman's obsession with intellect and problem-solving has created a villain whose only purpose is to challenge Batman's ability to solve Gotham's mysteries. The Riddler's puzzles are not just crimes to be solved. They are tests of Batman's ego, a test to see if Batman can maintain control over the situation. The more Batman solves the Riddler's riddles, the more the Riddler adapts, creating even more complicated puzzles. The Riddler thrives on Batman's need to control the outcome, on his need to be the smartest, the most capable, the one who always wins. Batman's intellectual obsession has created the conditions for the Riddler to exist, a criminal who seeks not to kill or steal, but to prove that Batman cannot control everything. The Riddler exists because Batman's desire to outsmart Gotham's criminals has given rise to a villain who can outsmart him at every turn. Each of these villains represents something deep within Batman himself. They are reflections of his own fears, his insecurities, and his internal battles. Gotham's villains are not just criminals to be defeated. They are part of the very psyche Batman has tried to suppress. The more Batman tries to eliminate crime, the more he feeds the chaos that keeps Gotham locked in its endless struggle. His refusal to kill, his rigid moral code, and his obsession with control have all created the very environment that allows these criminals to thrive. Gotham's darkness is not just a result of its criminality, it is a product of Batman's own fight. As long as Batman continues to fight for order, Gotham's villains will continue to rise. The cycle is eternal. Every victory Batman claims only paves the way for a new villain, one who will challenge him in new ways, one who will force him to confront another aspect of his psyche. Batman's mission is eternal, and so too is Gotham's struggle. But can Batman ever escape this cycle? Can he ever truly rid the city of its darkness? The answer, it seems, is no. Gotham will always need Batman, and Batman will always need Gotham. The cycle will continue because it is a cycle of Batman's own creation. Batman stands at the edge of his destiny, silhouetted against the Gotham skyline, the city that has shaped him, and that he, in turn, has shaped. Gotham is not merely a city of crime and corruption. It is a mirror reflecting every aspect of his existence. Its endless shadows echo his own fears, his own contradictions, his unyielding quest for justice. Every victory he claims feels fleeting, as though the battle for Gotham's soul is one he can never truly win. And perhaps that is the deepest tragedy of Batman's journey. Gotham's darkness is not just a product of the criminals who haunt its streets, but of the man who has sworn to save it. Batman's mission was clear from the start: to protect Gotham from the evil that threatened to destroy it. But in his pursuit of justice, he created the very chaos he sought to eliminate. Gotham's greatest villains are not just figures of malice and destruction. They are reflections of Batman's own internal battle, distortions of his deepest fears, contradictions and unresolved trauma. The Joker, Two-Face, Scarecrow, the Riddler, and all of Gotham's most infamous criminals are not merely criminals. They are manifestations of Batman's psyche, born from his own obsession with control, moral absolutism, and fear of failure. The Joker is perhaps the most devastating mirror to Batman's soul. The Joker is everything Batman fears: the chaos that can never be tamed, the madness that taunts Batman's every effort to impose order. The Joker exists to show Batman that his mission to impose order on the world is futile, that Gotham's darkness is something that cannot be fully eradicated. Every time Batman tries to contain the chaos, the Joker grows stronger, more cunning, more unpredictable. The Joker thrives on Batman's fear. The fear that Gotham is beyond saving, that he too might be lost to madness. The more Batman fights, the more he feeds the chaos the Joker represents, and the cycle continues, unbroken and endless. Two-Face, once Gotham's shining beacon of justice, is a tragic consequence of Batman's moral rigidity. Harvey Dent's transformation into Two-Face is not simply a response to Gotham's corruption. It is a reaction to Batman's own uncompromising stance on justice. Harvey's belief in absolute justice was shattered not only by Gotham's criminal world, but also by Batman's insistence that justice must always be black and white. In his efforts to impose moral clarity, Batman has created a villain who believes that justice is governed by chance, by randomness, and by the flip of a coin. Two-Face's existence is a reflection of Batman's failure to embrace the moral complexity of Gotham, a failure that ultimately led to the creation of a figure who symbolizes the duality of Batman's own world. Batman's rigid beliefs have created an environment in which the very concept of justice becomes distorted and unrecognizable. The Riddler, too, is a product of Batman's own intellectual obsessions. Batman's need to solve every puzzle, to outsmart every villain, has given birth to a mind that thrives on challenging Batman's intellect at every turn. The Riddler exists not just to commit crimes, but to test Batman's ego and prove that Batman cannot control every outcome. Batman's obsession with intellect and logic creates the perfect breeding ground for a mind like the Riddler's. The more Batman tries to outwit the Riddler, the more the Riddler adapts and pushes him further, ensuring that Batman's victory is always temporary. Batman's need to be the smartest, to control every situation, feeds directly into the Riddler's game. The Riddler is not just a criminal. He is a challenge to Batman's sense of self, a challenge to the very control Batman seeks. Scarecrow, the master of fear, is perhaps the most unsettling reflection of Batman's inner world. Fear is the very thing that drives Batman: the fear of failure, the fear of losing Gotham, the fear of becoming the very thing he fights against. But Batman's inability to fully confront and accept his fears has made him vulnerable to Scarecrow's fear toxin. Scarecrow forces Batman to face the darkest parts of his psyche, to confront the fears he has spent his entire life trying to suppress. But in doing so, Scarecrow also reminds Batman that his fear is not something he can simply control. It's a reminder that fear is not something that can be vanquished by force. Instead, Batman must learn to accept his own fear, his own vulnerability, in order to truly protect Gotham. But Scarecrow exists because Batman cannot face his own deepest fears, and by refusing to confront them, Batman feeds into Scarecrow's ability to manipulate him. Each of Gotham's villains, then, is a consequence of Batman's own internal conflict. The more Batman tries to impose order on Gotham, the more he feeds into the chaos that makes Gotham's criminal underworld thrive. Batman's unwavering moral code, his obsession with control, and his refusal to confront his own psychological demons have created the conditions for the villains he faces. Gotham's criminals are not just products of the city's decay, they are reflections of Batman's psyche, the dark, unresolved parts of himself that he has tried to suppress. The more he fights against them, the more he realizes that he cannot truly escape from the darkness that has shaped him. The tragic reality that Batman must face is that he cannot win the war against crime, because it is a war that has been created by his own actions. Gotham's corruption is not just external, it is internal, woven into the very fabric of the city's soul. And Batman, in trying to impose order, has become part of that corruption. His unyielding battle has created a city that cannot function without the chaos he fights against, a city where the villains rise from his own inner darkness. Gotham will never truly be saved, because Batman is not just its protector, he is the creator of the very chaos that defines it. The question then becomes, is Gotham's struggle ever truly winnable? Is Batman's fight for justice futile, or is it an eternal cycle that will never end? The deeper truth is that Gotham's darkness cannot be eradicated because it exists in Batman's heart. The cycle of crime and redemption will continue as long as Batman remains its protector, because the villains are not just external threats, they are the reflections of his own soul, his unconscious fears, and his unwillingness to compromise. Gotham's struggle is eternal, as Batman's will to fight is unbreakable. Batman's endless war on crime is more than a mission to save Gotham. It is a battle to understand himself, to come to terms with the darkness within him. And no matter how many villains he defeats, no matter how many crimes he prevents, the real battle, the one that defines his existence, is not with Gotham's criminals, but with the inner demons that will always remain. Gotham's greatest villains will always rise again, but so will Batman, locked in an eternal struggle that cannot be broken. Batman's journey is one of endless conflict, both external and internal. As he faces Gotham's darkest foes, he is ultimately facing his own darkest truths. The cycle of crime and redemption will never end, because Gotham and Batman are bound together in an inextricable link. Would you like to explore more about the psychological dynamics between Batman and his city, or perhaps delve deeper into the eternal struggle he faces? The questions are endless, and there are always new layers to uncover in this story.